The Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Pride Seeds, Aragon LQ Pre-Harvest Weed Control, and Cruiser Max Vibrance Beans.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin. Welcome to Soybean School. Today I'm joined by Horst Bonner, OMFRA's soybean specialist. Horst, how's it going?
Excellent. Good to be with you.
Hey, it's been a pretty good year to be a soybean specialist in Ontario. We're seeing some record yields. You got to be happy.
Yeah, it's really amazing how things turned out, Bernard. When you think about the spring, and all those concerns, especially even around prices and marketing, and here we are in the fall, turned out to be a record crop. But what's really cool, and that doesn't happen every year by any stretch, is that good yields and good prices came together for so many growers. Awesome, right? Awesome.
Yeah, Horst, we're going to be talking about that topic all winter, how we got to those yields. But one thing I want to talk about is one of the success factors that obviously plays a role, and that is fine-tuning the planter. And, earlier this summer, you did a great video in our series on the Ontario Diagnostic Days about, some planter tips and trials you conducted this summer. Tell us about your research. What were you trying to measure?
Yeah, so typically, of course, when we talk about soybean establishment, we get all excited about seeding rates, right? Can we adjust those? And can we, work with the depth and, tillage practices and these kind of things? But sometimes we miss the boat a little bit on how to run the planter or the drill that we have available to us. And of course, to use the piece of equipment properly is so important to get that early plant establishment even, and we want the beans to come up as much as possible at the same time. So there really are some adjustments there that I think we can make. Especially, to be honest, I've had that planter, the one we're going to talk about here, since 2008. And I think I know how to set it up. I think I know. But until you do some good experiments, sometimes there's a few surprises there in terms of what you should be doing, right?
Talk about what you're looking at. You mentioned four things in this video: down pressure, coulter depth, closing systems, and even some speed.
Right. So with this particular planter, so it's got John Deere row units on it, 7,200 units, and it came originally with just springs. It is a vacuum planter. And in no-till, which is mostly how I do my plots, although, to be honest with you, I do really think there are some benefits to a little bit of pre-tillage in the spring that solves some of the problems we're going to talk about. But anyway, we went to putting on a precision planting compressor, an Air Force down pressure system that has the airbags so that we can adjust the amount of down pressure on those row units and really make sure the seed is in the ground. So that's the one thing. And then, of course, we did also put on coulters at the front of that planter on a separate gang that we can raise and lower. And part of that was just for fertilizer placement. But the other part of it is, there is this issue that when you get close to a corn row or some extra residue, can that coulter out front push some of that residue away? And then we can get more accurate seed placement. So that's one of the other things that, I wanted to test in terms of the depth. Now, the obvious question that you might ask right away, why not put on row cleaners and really push that residue away? I've tried that in the past, and so far I'm still not sure how to do it properly in the sense of row spacing. I have 15-inch rows. And if I put a nice row cleaner on there, even not a very aggressive one, I've done that in the past, we end up throwing the residue from one row onto the next. So you'll see that that's not part of my equation. My way of looking at that in this particular little conversation is just those coulters, right? And then, like you mentioned, the closing wheels at the back, we're going to hit on that. And then also, is there something to be learned from speed?
For sure. And now, you planted this trial, replicated it. Then we went back 30 days later, did some plant stand counts.
Right.
Let's take a look at that data. Tell us at this point, what are you learning?
Right. So, I mean, it is fun to go back and just see how many plants emerged, see if there's any obvious problems. So that's what we always do in plots. So our standard down pressure, where we ran those airbags at the standard setting. So again, they do fluctuate up and down depending on the pressure of the condition of the field. 141,000 plants per acre. Perfectly normal stand in no-till. And right away you'll see no down pressure, where we turn those bags off to try and mimic not having enough force to get into the ground. Yeah, we lost significant plants. We went to 128,000. And then, where we set the planter for heavy down pressure, which is, what I think is the right way to set that planter in soybeans, in no-till, in the plots that I'm doing, 144,000, really nice kind of plant stand there. So I'm pretty convinced that's the way my planter should be set up for down pressure.
Let's talk about coulters. You ran them deep at 3.5 inches, 3.5 inches, and you had no coulters. What did you learn there?
Yeah, so let's start with the no coulters. There were some big gaps, and you can see that in the video when you go back and you look. There's some big gaps in those plant stands, and yet overall the plant stand was okay, right? And that's just the way it works sometimes in soybeans. So really, we didn't see a big difference there. But the 3.5 inches deep, I would have thought we'd actually decrease stands. And, we didn't decrease stands either there. That's just the way it is sometimes in soybean research. Things don't turn out exactly the way you would have predicted. So at the end of the day, when I look at where you should set your depth based on this little plant stand data set, there's no problem with running them deep.
Talk about, I guess, your closing systems here. Gauge tines, rubber wheels, some interesting data here.
Yeah, right. So we put on one gauge tine wheel and left the rubber closing wheel, good plant stand. And then where we put on 2 gauge tine, actually, the plant stand was a little bit better. I really like that scenario, and so I'm going to leave those on my planter now, both gauge tines. I thought originally they might be too aggressive, but these plant stands show that, no, they're fine. Mm-hmm. The other thing that's kind of interesting here, you'll see that where I rolled after planting, right? We've talked about rolling before, but we actually decreased stands just a little bit, and I think that's from maybe just a little bit of crusting, a little bit too much pressure after. From a plant stand perspective, not as good as rolling when they've come up. But let's see what the yields show in a minute, because that's quite interesting. But in terms of rolling, it sure is nice to have things flat, right?
What about speed here? Are you surprised that when you go 6 and 8 miles an hour, you're not losing plant stand?
Yeah, this is one of those things where you kind of go, surely at 8 mile an hour, things are going to be a problem. Well, obviously my planter can handle getting out the seed, and I think as long as your down pressure is good, that's the key with this stuff, right? If you're going to drive faster, you need to have enough down pressure to push into the ground and through that residue. But yeah, really no difference in stand there.
Now, of course, Horst, it all comes down to yield. Let's add in some yield numbers here. And it really does look like those stand count assessments did translate to yield. Some nice yields across the board here, especially with a little heavy down pressure.
Yeah, look at that, eh? So we went from 73 bushels in the standard setting to 74.5 with the heavy down pressure, and like you said, that correlates to the plant stand. It really convinces me in no-till with my planter, heavy down pressure is important. And of course, on the flip side, the no down pressure shows the opposite, right? We reduced yield where we had those huge gaps.
What about the gauge time numbers you're seeing here? You got the rubber closing wheel at 75.5, and after rolling, a similar number.
Yeah, that's right. So overall, when you just take those numbers as an aggregate, those gauge tines did a really nice job for us, right? And the other interesting thing is that even though rolling after reduced stands a little bit, right, the yield there was excellent. So again, you come back to what are the benefits of rolling? I think it's largely picking up more seed at the end of the season. So in my scenario, I'm going to keep those gauge tines on. That's what those numbers tell me. And I'm going to keep rolling. That there is something to picking up a couple extra bushels to rolling.
The final thing about speed here, obviously you had the plant stands, but you lost a little yield on the faster planting.
Yeah, and essentially those yields are almost the same as the standard, but you're right, compared to the best setting, the best scenario we could come up with there, we did lose a couple of bushels. And so obviously there is something to be said about running a piece of equipment at the right speed. But what I did learn is that I don't need to go 4 miles an hour. I can push it a little faster with my planter in soybeans. The exact spacing is less important for soybeans than it is for corn. And if you're getting 73 bushels when you're running 8 miles an hour for a planter that should be run at 4 to 5 miles an hour, it's just not as important as it is for corn, right?
Hey, final takeaways from you when you look at down pressure, coulter depth, the closing systems. What do you tell growers based on what you saw this year?
Yeah, so first of all, you have to have enough down pressure in whatever system you are planting into to make sure that the row closes properly, right? Especially if you've got some residue there. So I'm a big fan of lots of down pressure. I think that's less of an issue with respect to sidewall compaction on soybeans than corn, because you're not going as deep, right? As you put that seed deeper, 2.5 inches for corn, for instance, sidewall compaction becomes more of an issue. So that's one. We need the pressure. Number two, I still think getting some of that residue out of the row is a benefit. For me, I use a coulter. Other people use row cleaners or maybe even some different form of pre-tillage. I think that's important. And finally, there really is something to be said about not driving too fast with whatever piece of equipment you've got. They are engineered to go a certain speed, and it's important to stay within that.
Awesome. Well, Horst, hey, some great insights, some great research. Thanks for stopping by and sharing with us. We'll see you down the road.
It's been fun. Take care, Bernard.